Wow. I got saved by a supposedly extinct, smart, supernatural creature. I didn't even realize to ask for his name. I don't even know if it's a he. Sokka didn't feel like diving too deeply into the topic of where baby dragons come from. Magic? Eggs? Magical eggs? Probably one of those. Shaking his head of the idea, he tried to figure out where he was. Let's see what we have here. Trees over there, and over here we have even more trees. That's helpful, Sokka commented to himself. He hated to admit it, but he was lost. I can't believe I made sure Illa and Ari were going to be okay, but totally forgot to consider that I wouldn't be. The sun had risen hours ago, and Sokka had used it to gain his sense of direction. He was heading back toward the shore, or at least he hoped he was. Sokka tried to keep up a positive attitude, but he was gradually losing hope that his friends would find him. Heck, he wasn't even sure if they were looking for him. Katara and Aang wouldn't leave him behind on purpose, but for all he knew, they could be even bigger trouble than he was. Even if Katara and Aang were okay and actively searching for him, they still wouldn't know where to start looking. They'd probably guess he'd been captured by the pirates, which would lead to them in the wrong direction. They might find out that the Earth Kingdom militia was involved, but that too would be a bad thing, because odds were the militia wouldn't be glad to see the Avatar. And even if the militia would tell Katara and Aang all that had happened, how would they guess where a dragon had dropped Sokka off? As if hiking in the thick woods wasn't obvious enough, Sokka was starting to have a headache. More exactly, he was having the headache that the pirates gave him, now back with a vengeance. Sitting down to rest, the day was getting hot as the sun kept climbing higher, and Sokka wished he had brought some water with him. Seriously though, why didn't I have a water skin? I don't have to be a bender to appreciate the element. Living on the South Pole, drinkable water was always been abundantly available, as long as you knew how to melt it. Something passed in front of the sun, casting a shadow on the ground when Sokka was sitting. The teenager was immediately on his feet again, his first thought being that the dragon had returned. When he peered to the sky, he could see Appa flying in the distance. Okay, that should be my first guess. Sokka started to yell and wave his arms around to catch his friend's attention, but they were too far away. The bison made no move that would indicate that it had heard or seen him. Instead, it was moving slowly but steadily away from Sokka. You're the idea guy. Think of something, Sokka told himself. The first idea that came to mind was to build a signal fire. Even in the daylight, this cloud of smoke would be enough to catch their attention. But since Sokka wasn't a firebender, building and creating a bonfire out of scratch would take a long time. Not that he wanted to be a firebender. This just happened to be one of those incredibly rare occasions where firebenders would have come in handy. Next, Sokka thought of scaling a tree and waving at them from there, but he had to be realistic. He didn't have much experience in tree climbing, so he'd probably end up falling on his face. If Sokka had a shiny metal object with him, he could try to reflect the sun's light off of it and maybe catch Katara and Aang's attention that way. Problem was, he had no metal objects with him. Even his fishhooks were made of bone. Okay, another thing to add to my list of things I ought to carry with me. Now what? The bison was still getting further away, and Sokka was getting anxious. They were so close and yet so far. He knew he was desperate, but Sokka started to run after the bison, trying to keep it in sight. He rampaged through bush after bush, branches scratching his skin. No matter how fast he ran, the bison was getting smaller against the bright sky. No, 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 get back here, please! Sokka begged. He was already out of breath, but couldn't give up now. Just one more brush. Sokka rounded one more bush and stepped dead on his tracks. Not because he was too tired to continue, but because he wasn't alone in the forest. Sokka had entered a temporary Fire Nation camp full of Fire Nation soldiers. The soldiers looked as surprised to see Sokka as he was to see them. Did you hear that? Aang asked Katara as he peered behind him to see what was going on in the forest below. Yes, I did, Katara said, lifting her head from where she'd been resting it against her hands. She looked tired, and Aang knew why. Katara had had trouble sleeping. She still blamed herself for what happened to Sokka. because she had been the one to steal from the pirates in the first place. Aang was worried for Sokka too, but they were already doing all they could to find him. It wasn't Katara's fault the militia had been less than helpful when they asked them if they knew where Sokka was. Sitting long hours in silence in Appa's saddle wasn't going to make them find Sokka any faster. A loud boom echoed through the air. There! Katara pointed at a patch of forest. There was a thin line of smoke rising from it. Aang nodded and started turning Appa around. What do you think it is? The Fire Nation, Katara said solemnly. She's probably right, but Aang didn't like the way Katara's tone and expression darkened whenever she spoke of the Fire Nation. It was unnerving to see her angry and sad. You think they're going to burn down another forest? Aang asked, sincerely worried. Whatever they're doing, we need to stop it, Katara concluded. Yep, Aang guided his bison down, and soon they reached the source of the smoke. There was a fight going on. Aang peered down and attempted to determine who was fighting who. It looked Fire Nation was one party, but he couldn't be sure who they were battling. Another small explosion occurred on the ground, blowing up a Fire Nation tent, sending a smoke trench in the wake. Suddenly, Katara reached out over to Aang and yanked his tunic so hard the airbender almost lost his balance. Look! It's Sokka! She pointed down into the battle at a man dressed in water-tribe blue. We gotta help him! Aang landed Appa into the fray, jumped down and threw a couple of Fire Nation soldiers off their feet with his fans. Sokka! We're here to rescue you! Sokka turned around and smiled wildly at him. Katara also climbed down from the bison and was running towards Sokka. Out of nowhere, a Fire Nation soldier with a spear stopped Katara in her tracks. Before Katara or Aang or Sokka had time to react, someone swooped in and took the soldier down with crafty use of hook swords. Their savior was a young, dark-haired man in ragged clothing. Casually chewing on a straw, he turned to face Katara and Aang. The young man smiled playfully and said, "At your service." Then he charged off again, taking down a soldier Sokka had been about to attack. The Fire Nation soldiers were fighting a group of kids, but thankfully the kids were winning. With Aang and Katara's help, the fight was over soon, giving the two the final chance to get to Sokka. Sokka! Katara cried, hugging her brother, tears running down her face. I was so worried. Don't ever disappear like that again. Glad to see you too, sis, Sokka replied, his voice a bit choked due to Katara's tight embrace. And you too, Aang. Sokka waved at him over Katara's shoulder. Aang replied with a wide grin. We've been looking all over for you. What happened to your head? Sokka sighed and tried to wave her sister off, but Katara didn't let go. She still looked serious, almost sad. Katara caught on her mood and hugged back tighter for a moment, and said, I really am fine, promise. Katara sighed and let go of her brother, now meeting Sokka face to face. I'm sorry. You could have been hurt or worse, and it's all my fault. Hurt? Me? The greatest warrior of the Southern Water Tribe? I don't think so. Sokka tried to lighten the mood. Besides, most of the mess I've got myself into recently has been no one's fault but my own. Katara cast her eyes down and bit back tears. I stole the water-bending scroll. First, Sokka's expression was blank, as if he was not an idea what she was talking about. Then a look of disbelief and anger crossed his face. His voice alarmingly calm, Sokka asked, You stole from the pirates? That's why they came after us with forks and knives? Katara nodded. How irresponsible, no, selfish do you have to be to do that? I know that waterbending means a lot to you, but stealing from the pirates? Really, Katara? Don't you think about anyone but yourself? Katara was getting back some of her usual spirit. It wasn't for me. Aang needs to learn waterbending too. The world depends on it. It's true, Aang agreed, coming to Katara's defense. Sokka was being too hard on her. He didn't know how much she had really suffered because of what had happened. Don't say you did it for Aang. We both know you're the one person who we're thinking about was you. And since have you started stealing? Dad raised you better than that. Mom raised you better than that. Sokka ranted. Katara's eyes darkened, first because of hurt, then because of anger. Wake up, Sokka. We're in a war. There's no time to be nice or play by the book. You think the Fire Nation cares if they steal stuff? Sokka no longer looked angry, but he kept arguing. I don't care how much the Fire Nation has stolen. You didn't steal from the Fire Nation. You only went down to their level. Katara huffed angrily and turned away from Sokka. An uncomfortable silence stretched between the siblings. Sokka sighed and continued in a calmer tone. Look, I'm sorry I compared you to the Fire Nation. I didn't mean it. I've had a long day is all. I'm sure we're all tired, Aang pinched in. He didn't like the way this conversation was playing out. Katara and Sokka loved each other, and still everything was going all wrong. This was a reunion. Reunions were supposed to be happy. Hey there. Aang, Katara, and Sokka turned to look. The boy that had come to their rescue earlier was now approaching them. I hate to interrupt your moment, but I thought you should come and see you're okay. Yeah, Aang began, but was interrupted by Katara's enthusiastic reply. We're good. Thanks for your help. You were wonderful back there. And you? The boy turned to Sokka. We're a great distraction. We've been waiting for hours for an opportunity to ambush the Fire Nation troops. Glad I could be in use, Sokka said in a sullen tone that contradicted his words. By the way, who are you guys? Where are my manners? The boy did an elaborate stage bow. Name's Jet, and these are my freedom fighters. It looked like Jet was about to introduce them to his gang, but Sokka cut in. Yeah, about that. You're not the first freedom fighters we've run into. Are you by any chance in league with Earth's Kingdom militia? Jet looked surprised, but composed himself quickly. No, we're not. Don't get me wrong, the militia is doing important work, but the Fire Nation is the enemy. Getting rid of them should be every Earth Kingdom citizen's first priority. Hey, that's exactly what we said to them, Aang pointed out. Speaking of the militia, Katara turned to look at her brother. What happened between you and Shin? Aang and I had to literally fight a way out of their camp after we went to ask them if they had seen you. Yeah, right. I was going to give you guys a heads up about that. Sokka swallowed, looking uncomfortable. The militia sort of rescued me from the pirates, and I repaid them by stealing a prisoner from them. Don't think they're too happy about that. I can't believe you're the one lecturing me about stealing, Katara huffed. Aang tried to keep the conversation going before it would turn into another argument. Shin said you had aided the Fire Nation, but we didn't believe him. We know you wouldn't do that. Aiding the Fire Nation is exaggeration. We were more like... Sokka looked incredibly uncomfortable at the topic. I mean, it just wasn't right the way they were pinning everything the Fire Nation has done on one soldier. A girl soldier. So, something had to be done soon because you really should have been there to understand it. It felt like a good idea when Il explained it to me. Katara looked appalled. Jet sounded surprised as he asked, You freed a Fire Nation soldier? I know it sounds awful, but the militia were at least as so much to blame as me. I mean, they were going to kill her for, no particular reason. Sokka explained to Jet, and then turned to Aang. You're with me on this, right? Aang didn't like to be drawn into the argument, but he did have an opinion on the matter. All life is sacred. I don't want to see anyone. All life is sacred. I don't want anyone to have to die. Are you both out of your minds? Katara suddenly exploded. They're Fire Nation. They killed all the air nomads. They killed Mom. They're the reason we haven't seen our father in 2 years. This war, all of it, is their fault. Hey, I saved one Fire Nation woman, and since she didn't look 120 to me, we can hardly hold the air nomad card against her. Sokka replied angrily. And if we had a Fire Nation prisoner, we wouldn't just kill her, Aang put in. Katara looked surprised when the boys were teaming up against her on this. Jack stepped closer, holding his hands up in a calming gesture. Look, I know this war is an emotional topic for everyone, but you have to remember that the day we let the Fire Nation turn us against our friends is the day we lose this fight. Instead of focusing on what separates us, we should focus on the things that we have in common. And that is our mission to destroy the Fire Nation. Jet turned to Katara. I know how you feel. I too lost my parents to the Fire Nation. Really? Katara stiffened. I'm so sorry. Jet placed a hand on Katara's shoulder and smiled at her gently. But all that is in the past now, and we've got to focus on the future. How about we agree to disagree and get going? I don't think any of us want to be here when the soldiers come back. That's true. Aang perked up, eager to change the topic. So you guys live around here? This morning, Zuko rose with the sun. Catching up to his usual sleeping rhythm, he was awake but still lying on the grass, letting the pale morning sun warm his scaly skin. He had stayed another night. Zuko told himself it was because he had been feeling lazy, but truth be told, he was hoping his new strange acquaintance would return. She promised she would. Zuko took deep breaths to warm himself, and could almost feel the sun kindling his inner fire. He'd always known it was the source of every firebender's power, but now that he was a dragon, his relationship with the sun felt easy as breathing. Zuko's ear moved. Surely Toph wouldn't be silly enough to jump a sleeping dragon twice. Zuko got his feet and peered around him. He wasn't alarmed this time, just curious. As far as he can tell, there was no reason for humans to come to this part of the forest. If what he heard was an animal moving around, it wouldn't come closer. Any sensible creature kept his distance from a large predator. It was odd that although Zuko hadn't eaten for days, he wasn't particularly hungry. Slow metabolism, perhaps? He had to eat something at some point, though, so maybe he should start practicing his hunting skills now. A tunnel opened up, and now the tunnel walked Toph Beifong. Seeing the girl was like having a weight lifted off his shoulders. Only now Zuko realized how much he'd been waiting for her, and how much he feared she wouldn't come. Zuko huffed to greet Toph, and it made clear she had been spotted. Toph smiled in return and waved her hand in more or less the right direction. Then she walked up to him. Hi, Flicker. Man, you should have seen the look on my earthbending teacher's face when he thought I overexerted myself and needed to stay in bed for 2 days in a row. Zuko created a mental link to Toph, unable to resist retorting. I bet we would have liked to see it too. Making fun of the handicapped, are we? Toph replied and created a tiny little rock slide under Zuko's front paw so they sank a bit to the ground, effectively demonstrating just how handicapped she was. Toph laughed and Zuko sort of laughed, a 30 dragon version of laughter. Zuko couldn't tell how different it was from his normal laugh, because he couldn't remember when was the last time he had laughed. Probably for the Agni Kai. So, what do you want to do today? Toph asked as she freed him from the ground. Zuko shrugged, which caused his shoulder to sting, wincing ever so slightly. Yeah, sorry about that. Toph apologized again. How does she notice these things? Zuko wondered, but knew better than to ask. All the response he would get would undoubtedly be, because I'm the greatest earthbender in the world. There was a network of tunnels under there. Toph pointed to the tunnel she had appeared from. We could go check them out if you want. They're big enough for badger moles, so you shouldn't have trouble fitting in them. Though it might get a bit crowded if you do run into a badger mole. But don't worry, I got your back. What do you say? Zuko couldn't have been less tempted, even if Toph hadn't brought up the possibility of encountering gigantic earthbenders while surrounded by their element. Instead, he made a counter-suggestion by waving his head, gesturing toward the sky. Oh great, more flying. Toph sounded less than enthusiastic. I guess flying would be fun for someone who knew how to. Or better yet, fly and see. Zuko intended to shrug but remembered his shoulder in time and just nodded. Toph went on. I kind of envy you for that. Zuko didn't know what to say. He wasn't exactly used to people envying his life. He communicated as much. People don't usually envy me. They hate, fear, and sometimes pity, but not envy. Oh, I didn't mean that I wanted to be you, or even a dragon or anything. And if you ask me, flying is totally overrated. I'm quite happy being the awesome earthbender that I am. And I bet your life isn't easy and your past sure as hell hasn't been. But you do have one thing that's going for you. You're so free. That's the part I envy. Free? As far as Zuko was concerned, the banished prince of the Fire Nation was surely one of the least free people in the world. His entire life had been all about trying to live up to other people's expectations of him. Zuko had never been free, and even though he had left his old life behind, he still didn't feel free of his duties. "There are people in prisons who are more free than I," Zuko replied solemnly. Toph made a face. "Well, at least you don't have overcautious moron parents who don't let you out of the house because they think you won't be able to handle it. Who thinks you're a precious porcelain doll and needs to be kept tidy and safe, hidden away from other people and, spirit forbid, excitement?" Zuko had spent the last 3 years of his life on the road. Try to picture what it would be like to live your life entirely inside 4 walls. It was surprisingly easy to imagine, since she had lived a relatively sheltered life in the palace before his banishment. "I see your point, but look at it this way. At least your parents care whether you're safe or not," Zuko replied. "Maybe, but I'm not sure you can call locking your child away from the world caring." Toph continued. "If it wasn't such an independent person, I may never have learned to take care of myself, and wouldn't have relied on other people my entire life. Wanting that for your child isn't wanting what's best for her." Zuko understood Toph's point. She was unhappy with her life, but had no means of changing it without upsetting her family. That's hard. Toph busily drew herself up. "That's enough with my sorry life. What about you? Why don't you feel free? Despite being able to go wherever you want, whenever you want." "I have duties. Just because I'm ignoring them right now doesn't mean they aren't still there. Also, I'm worried about someone I left behind. It's hard to feel at ease when you're not sure whether the people you care about are safe or not." "So there is someone who cares about my pet dragon other than me, that is? You must tell me more about this mystery decent person, so I know my competition," Toph said in a playful tone. Against all odds, Zuko was okay with the topic of Uncle. His uncle was one of the few things in his life that felt right. So Zuko told Toph about how Uncle had come with him into his banishment, followed him wherever he went and kept him company, even though he didn't have to. Things Zuko was only now in his newfound loneliness starting to fully appreciate. By all intents and purposes, Uncle was the only family I have. I'm beginning to think he might have been the only family I had even before my banishment, Zuko concluded. He briefly wondered if he could clarify that Uncle wasn't a dragon, as one might presume under the circumstances. However, explaining how that was possible would lead to a never-ending series of other things he didn't want to explain, so Zuko said nothing on the topic. He knew he'd have to tell Toph the truth eventually, but since they had only known each other for a few days, he was content with playing a normal dragon for now. "Your uncle sounds like a really cool guy," Toph said thoughtfully. "Caring, but still lets you make your own decisions. I wish my parents would like that." "You and me both." Toph tried to sound casual, asking her next question, but the biting of her lip gave away how nervous she was. "So, when are you going back to him?" "I'm not sure. For the first time since leaving, Zuko couldn't kid himself into believing he wasn't going to go back to Uncle. Admitting it was almost a relief. Zuko was so used to working toward a goal that he had been at ease with his new lack of direction. "Soon, I think." Toph smiled. "I'm happy for you. I'll miss you, but I'm happy you have a family to go back to." Zuko hesitated, but after Toph had been so nice to him, he felt obligated to say, "If you're unhappy here and want to leave, I could take you somewhere. Anywhere you want to go." "You take me with you?" Toph seemed genuinely surprised. "I don't think you'd be happy where I'm going. My life is complicated and I have a different road ahead of me. Difficult and dangerous." "You think I'm afraid?" Toph challenged him. "Also, you might have to enlist in the Fire Nation Navy to be allowed to go with me," Zuko added, and immediately regretted revealing so much about his life. Toph looked puzzled, but she asked nothing more. Hopefully she thought he had been kidding. In a way, he had. Sort of. Zuko tried to fix the situation with further explanation. You know, because I'm sort of Fire Nation, and since you don't like to fly, you could only follow me by sea, and I got it, Flicker. I might be blind, but I'm not blind. I figured out on my own the dragons are from the Fire Nation, you know, with the flames and all, Toph pointed out. Seriously though, I couldn't come with you even if you asked me to. My parents might be jerks sometimes, but they're my jerks. I mean, well, and I'd be pretty ungrateful putting them through their only child eloping with a firebender. Zuko understood what Toph was really saying. No matter how blind her parents are, she isn't ready to let them down. She's hoping they will come around and see things her way, and that she can start living her life the way she wants to live it. Zuko wanted to comfort her by saying he was sure they'd come around eventually, but he had never been much of a liar, so he just nodded to show that he understood. For a while, neither of them said anything, long before the silence got uncomfortable. However, Toph smiled wide and then she said, I know what we should do next. You want to fly and I want to go underground, right? I say we decide which plan we go through with a friendly sparring match. Toph smiled innocently while saying the word friendly. Zuko smiled back. They were all well on the same page. It was almost frightening. Nothing better to keep your mind from your worries than a challenging workout. I knew it! The first time I laid eyes on you, I just knew it! Jet said. Sokka rolled his eyes, but since the self-proclaimed freedom fighter didn't go on, he was forced to ask. Knew what? That you couldn't be trusted, Jet answered dramatically. Sokka had just about had it with this guy. Wait a second, let's get this straight. You are the one who's planning to trick my sister and my friend in helping you destroy a village full of innocent people, and I'm the one who can't be trusted? They're not innocent. They're Fire Nation. I thought you would understand that. They killed your mother. Really? You thought I would say things your way? Was this before or after you saw me and immediately knew I couldn't be trusted? Jet looked at him in open disgust. Your sister understands things much better. How you turned out such a traitor is beyond me. Right. So this was about their earlier conversation, where Toph had revealed he had helped Ari escape from the militia. He had suspected that was the reason Jet had been so cold toward him when they were alone, although it was all sugary sweetness when Katara and Aang were around. Sokka had had suspicions about Jet from the get-go. But since his sister and friend had refused to trust his warrior instincts on the matter, he had had no choice but to secretly follow the freedom fighter and his ragtag gang to the suspicious early morning meetings. Good thing he had, too. Sokka knew what the blasting jelly was really for. If it wasn't for Jet's lackeys holding him in place, Sokka would have punched the kid. His options were reduced to sarcastic comments. If you think Katara is so different and better than me, why don't you go back to the camp and tell her what you're really planning to do with that water? See how understanding she's then, Take him away, Jet ordered his troops, and keep a tight hold on him. There's no knowing what a spineless traitor might do. Sokka couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt at Jet's words. The boy was clearly crazy and wrong about him. But he did almost have a point too. This was the second time in many days that Sokka found himself defending the Fire Nation. Something he would have thought impossible just a few days ago. Creepy. What would his father say when he heard all the things his son had done? Would he be angry as Katara had been? When did things get so complicated? Sokka had to brush aside his worries for now. They could wait. But the village could not. Sokka had to find a way to warn the villagers of the meeting doom. Toph knew Flicker would never drop her, but she was still holding on for dear life. Next time, she reminded herself, don't let Flicker cheat. Toph was the greatest earthbender in the world, but even she had her weak points. One of the most critical being that she could only see things when they were touching the ground. Another being that Toph didn't know how to swim, but that was off the point. In a purely bending-based battle, Toph was convinced she would have emerged victorious. As it was, her new best friend wasn't human, which gave Flicker an unfair advantage. Toph had let him off too easy. Flicker was her only friend after all, and Toph didn't want to risk losing him. Next time, though, there'll be none of that, Toph swore to herself. No more kitty gloves. She was not seeing the appeal of flying yet, and was seriously doubting she ever would. She imagined flying was pretty unnerving, even for someone who could see, because seeing didn't give you any extra protection against falling. I bet flying is only fun for those who can fly. Toph didn't have much experience in the matter, but as far as she could tell, Flicker was flying fast. The dragon moved in a wiggly way, but the wiggling had a steady rhythm to it. He mostly soared, but sometimes he flapped his wings, which caused his whole body to shake. The cold wind was brushing against Toph's face and shuffling her hair. It was actually pretty refreshing compared to the hot body of the dragon that she was pressed against. At least this will be a good practice in case I ever had to fly again, Toph thought, before realizing that the odds of her becoming a frequent flyer were next to none. All the large creatures that are used to roam the skies, namely dragons and flying bisons, were extinct. Well, clearly more so in the theory than in practice. Flicker changed directions and picked up speed. What's the hurry? Toph shouted over the gushing wind. First she thought she wasn't going to get a response, but then a brief message went through. I'm hunting. Hunting what? I don't know. That's the fun part. Yeah, hilarious. Slow down and land now. To Toph's surprise, the dragon did as he was told. Toph could tell they were descending, and soon enough, Flicker's feet touched the ground. They must not have been very high. She jumped down from Flicker's paws, letting the earth embrace her. We really gotta talk about your... Toph began, but was silenced by a mental shush. She felt like asking what now, and then she saw it. Within her line of sight was another creature. Big one. We're hunting that? Toph whispered in disbelief. You're insane! It's gotta be 10 times your mass! What is that thing? A flying bison. The dragon replied, his tone suddenly weary. Toph made a mental note to have a word with her tutors about the varying definitions of extinct. I gotta break it to you, buddy. It's totally out of your league, she pointed out pragmatically. Before Flicker had time to respond, the wind direction changed. For a moment it blew from behind them, carrying their scent with it, alerting the bison. The creature made a bellowing sound and lifted itself off the ground. Toph prepared herself, feeling vulnerable the way she did when things moved out of her range of vision, but no attack came. You mind telling me what the beast is up to? Toph asked through clenched jaws. It's going back to its master, her friend replied cryptically. Toph got the feeling something crucial was being left out. Too bad, Toph retorted, still not feeling at ease enough to lower her earthbending stance. Next time I'm gonna... But Flicker never heard what they were going to say next because a thundering boom swallowed the rest of Toph's words. The earth shook hard, which was unnatural. Earth was supposed to be steady. Toph knew earthquakes existed, but this area never got them. Toph's world was literally shaken apart, blurring her vision. Toph focused. She was a master earthbender. She could do this. That's when she saw it. Or didn't so much see it, she felt it against her element. The powerful beast with 1,000 heads. For a blink of an eye, Toph froze. The thought of, I can't swim, screaming through her head. Then Flicker was in her head again. The damn bloke. The flood wave coming. It won't hit us. We'll hit a village. His thoughts were desperate. Toph realized there was nothing Flicker could do to save the village. But she could. She planted her feet firmly on the ground. She was the greatest earthbender in the world, and it was time to live up to that title. Toph gathered all her strength, focused her attention on the dark nothingness of the flood water, and lifted as big a wall as she could in direction in front of the flood. The momentum of the water was too great. Most of it crashed through a wall with ease. Water wants to move. You can't stop it. You must redirect it. Flicker shouted advice inside her head. Dig! Toph's hands were sweating. She knew she only had time for one more try. Better make it count. She gestured with her hands in an unnaturally flowy way, moving a huge chunk of dried-up riverbed in an attempt to create a deep moat for the river to go to. Then she lifted high, a thick wall for her new canal, hoping it would be enough to guide the water past the town. It worked. The tsunami hit the side of the channel hard, but most of the water bent before it tossed earth and followed with ease the path laid out for it. Toph took a deep breath, only now remembering to breathe. She'd been in fights before, but had never been this serious. Never a question of life or death. "You did it!" Flicker chimed in. "You're amazing!" "Don't I know it?" Toph said, but her voice and body were still shaking. "Next time?" She paused to breathe. "Would be nice to leave a few seconds to spare. Good thing I was here, though. Otherwise, the accident could have ended badly for a lot of people." Not an accident. Flicker's thought was full of rage. Toph had never felt him that angry. The fury was practically radiating off of him. Toph would have taken a step back if her ego allowed it. A flaming arrow, explosions. Someone did this on purpose. Someone is going to pay. Toph thought that over and nodded. "Lead the way."